A growing grassroots revolt for Labour against Brexit, a possibly illegal order in America, and Article 50 begins its two-day debate in the House of Commons. Welcome to TIP TV Politics. On the show this week, Chair of Labour Against Brexit, Jon Proctor, and on the sofa to chat Article 50, Trump and all other things Brexit, Laura Hood, political editor of The Conversation, and Chloe Westley of Change Britain. So let's start with the Trump executive order, which has obviously been the front of the headlines for the past few days. Laura, let's start with you. The news out in the past few hours is that the sacking of the US Attorney General Sally Yates by Donald Trump because of her lack of compliance with his executive order. What does that show about the way Donald Trump is going to handle politics and political confrontation during his presidency, do you think?
I think it's incredibly symbolic. She was acting in the position. She was an Obama appointee, of course, and was on the way out anyway. But I think it speaks volumes about the way he sees legal issues, and I think it's very, very significant to fire someone in that position and to depict her as betraying her department. I think that's a very, very key word, the fact that he said that she'd betrayed her department by speaking out against the executive order. It's page 1 of the authoritarian handbook to come and go after the legal profession. That's the first thing you do when you want to take control, when you want to have your way politically in your nation. And I think it's very, very significant that she has been ousted. I think it shows that he... Sorry.
No. Well, I was just going to say, what about the protests themselves? There was obviously quite significant protest against the executive order. Do you think that's going to play on Trump's mind at all? Do you reckon this is something which he's not going to worry about the number of protesters on his doorstep?
I think he's shown quite a lot of disregard for protests in the past, but I think it's interesting that the protesters have been able to cause disruption to the functioning of airports. I think that's quite a... I was talking to an academic today about this who was saying that if you want protests to succeed, you need to keep momentum going, but you also need to actually cause disruption where it makes sense. So he's shown a disregard for people who disagree with him. If they can continue to cause problems for the actual operations of the country, then maybe they might hit him where it hurts.
And in terms of the international response to this executive order, does the fact that Trump was democratically elected to implement this policy, I mean, it was widely publicised, in loose terms during his campaign and what he was saying, does it make it any more justifiable? Does he have a fair point if he says, look, I was voted in to do this, don't be outraged now?
International leaders don't seem to think so. They've taken the news pretty badly and have spoken out against it. I think that's perhaps to be expected, but I do also think that it's worth considering what people actually thought they were voting on when they voted for Trump. He was depicting this as an issue that could protect them from terrorism, and the figures, the actual information available suggests that this is not a particularly effective approach to national security. And I think maybe if they thought a bit more about that side of things, perhaps they wouldn't have voted for a policy of this kind. Okay,
well, let's move to talking of international reaction. Let's talk about what happened in the UK with relation to Donald Trump and also his relationship with Theresa May. Obviously, she was there last week for a visit. It's been reported that over more than 35 cities across the UK, there was a presence of some kind of protest to Donald Trump's order. What do we know about why people in the UK decided to protest against what is an American policy debate?
I think there was a sense of disappointment to see Theresa May sort of blithely disregarding these issues as she sought a trade deal with Trump. I think the UK found itself in a position of international leadership by virtue of being the first nation to be received by the president. And with that, I think a lot of people felt came some responsibility to speak out when something went when this policy was announced, and that opportunity was not taken. And I think people felt sort of a sense of national responsibility that was not met.
I mean, do you have any sympathy for Theresa May in the sense that she's got a very difficult job as it is negotiating Brexit, and at the same time she must be aware of the importance of a US special relationship, this historic special relationship we've had. And yet she's sort of stuck in that she can't really do anything on either way, which isn't going to annoy a proportion of people.
Sure, but I think she sort of has this very special kind of way of avoiding questions, and I think I don't think it's unreasonable to think that she would respond to concerns on these issues. And I think also that when she did make a statement on this matter, the move was to protect British citizens, to look after our own, rather than sort of speaking to a more international responsibility towards refugees and towards people who are stuck in this executive order. And I think to assume a position of international importance and then to abdicate it, I think that's what caused a lot of people to feel critical of.
And of course, some people on the march, it was organised by the commentator and left-wing commentator, you could say, Owen Jones. It got a huge amount of support, including from members of the Labour Party. Clive Lewis addressed the crowd outside of Downing Street and called Theresa May to end her appeasement of Donald Trump. And other politicians such as the Shadow Attorney General Shami Chakrabarti was there and Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott. So a strong Labour presence at these protests, particularly from the front bench. Is this a great attack opportunity for the Labour Party against the government?
I think, yeah, potentially Labour is in a good position to speak out on some of these issues. These are the kinds of issues that Jeremy Corbyn is known to have very strong positions on, refugees, human rights. And yeah, I think people will be looking to Labour to speak out on it.
And what do we know about this, the mood towards revoking this invitation of a state visit or downgrading the state visit to an official visit? You've had the 1.6, when I checked, million signatures on the petition to revoke the invitation. Do we know anything about the mood in Westminster, about how the government and how the Parliament is going to respond to this petition?
I think we can expect to see it kicked into long grass. It's sort of now emerged that we could potentially have President Trump to the UK without it being an official state visit, and then have the state visit a lot further down the line. So I expect that's the kind of thing that we'll be seeing to sort of avoid the current tensions that we're seeing. So perhaps a visit from him in the not too distant future, but a state visit much further down the line when everyone's cooled down a bit. Okay,
Chloe, the harsh reality is, isn't it, that a trade deal with the US and a special relationship with the US and between Theresa May and Donald Trump is going to present an enormous amount of opportunities in a post-Brexit landscape.
Yes, it's a huge opportunity for the UK and for America. So before leaving the customs union, the UK will be expecting Brussels to take care of all trade negotiations, and the US-EU negotiations have not turned out to be a success. They've kind of stalled and doesn't look like it's going to go ahead now. And Trump has said that we could negotiate a fair deal very quickly. That would be a good thing for both of our countries. The US is the single largest export market for the UK. I think it was about 16% of our exports in November last year went to the US. So I think it's a big opportunity. The UK also works with the US on issues other than trade. So there's a very strong defence relationship, for example, through the intelligence sharing arrangement with Five Eyes. And I don't think Theresa May needs to go back on her principles or to change, the identity of the UK to have a special relationship with the US. There are countries in the world that clearly the UK does not agree with their domestic policy. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't engage with them and that we shouldn't seek to do trade and have positive relations with. For example, I didn't agree with the burqa ban in France, but I don't think that means we shouldn't negotiate a comprehensive trade deal with the EU when we leave the customs union.
Now, Jeremy Corbyn is imposing a 3-line whip on all Labour MPs this week to support the government's triggering of Article 50. But one grassroots organisation is building support against the Labour leader, with their official letter of complaint being backed by over 5,000 Labour members, and that's within 72 hours. But what is the movement hoping to actually achieve? For their first TV interview, I go in focus with Labour Against Brexit. Jon Proctor, you're the chair of this organisation, Labour Against Brexit. Just give me an idea of what your motivation is for this campaign.
I feel like our motivation has been to change the Labour Party's discussion, because we don't believe the Labour Party is correct in its views at the current moment of Brexit. And we believe that the people like Boris Johnson and co have led the country a massive lie, and the Labour Party should be saying, hang on a second, you need to now either fulfil your honour or we can't support Brexit.
Just give us, when did you start your campaign? When did your campaign officially sort of kick off?
It officially launched 2 weeks ago, just around 2 weeks ago.
And what's been the level of support you've got from Labour members, Labour supporters across the country?
Across the country, we've had absolutely enormous amounts of emails, messages, tweets, 5,000 Facebook supporters, we've 2,000 Twitter supporters, hundreds of emails that we're getting, hundreds of messages that we're getting.
Is that in support of what you're doing?
In support, people wanting to get involved, wanting to join us, and it's been crazy.
Has there been a type of Labour supporter that you've noticed there isn't any sort of particular faction of the Labour Party which is supporting? Has it been fairly universal?
I would say it's been completely universal, because we've had people who support Jeremy Corbyn, we've had people who support Owen Smith, and across the board it has been like supported by everyone, because there is Corbyn supporters who do not agree with Jeremy's current stance on Brexit. There's Owen Smith supporters who believe that the second referendum needs to happen, and there's people in the middle who don't support either side, who are just worried about what's going to happen.
Let's talk about this letter, this open letter to Jeremy Corbyn that started on the weekend, and in 72 hours it's reached 5,000 signatories. What is the motivation behind? What is the contents of that letter really trying to spell out to Jeremy Corbyn?
I think the motivation behind the letter was to show him that the members don't agree with Brexit in its current form, and we don't believe there's been enough discussion in our own party as to the line of where we're taken. We've had an inconsistent, incoherent message, which has resulted in mixed messages being portrayed in the media by our front bench, and our message has been very clear. We don't support the current stance on Brexit. We would like more discussions in the Labour Party, and moreover, we'd like to see the party actually get back to its socialist values of defending the people who we need to be defending.
Just going on to the sort of Labour values and core values of Labour, are you worried at all that in this movement to sort of counter Jeremy Corbyn's stance on Brexit at the moment, you might alienate Brexit voters who are from the Labour heartlands who might think to shift to UKIP in response to this?
That's a good question. We've been very open with our campaign. We've always said, look, we're not attacking anyone. We've been very clear to say, look, you may have voted Brexit. We completely understand you're not wrong. The people who did lie to you are like Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, and the Vote Leave campaigners who paraded around with a big red light bus on it.
But is this a pro-EU movement? Is this fundamentally stating that we do not want to trigger Article 50, or is it simply saying we want a bigger discussion in the Labour Party about Article 50?
I would say both. I would say we haven't had enough discussion on the debates within the party, and we're not sure where we are with it. So we can't vote on it when we know where we are. I mean, we've got MPs like Ben Bradshaw and Ian Murray who are saying, look, I can't vote for this, my constituents would vote me out, and this is dangerous for the country. Then you've got other MPs who I fully respect, like Ronnie Campbell and co, who are saying, look, we need to believe in...
So there isn't an overarching view that Labour should not be supporting the triggering of Article 50? Because obviously you say in, I think you're a piece for The Observer, how the Labour Party's never been anti-EU. It sort of hints towards that this is a movement for a pro-EU stance from Labour rather than a bigger discussion on Article 50.
I mean, we've always been a party of Europeans. We've always believed that our friends in Europe are our friends and comrades. We want the best trade deals and we want the best negotiation deals with them. And we just don't believe, like, the way it's going down at the moment, we are going to be able to get that. So we've been saying, look, we're not going to be able to achieve these. We don't believe that we'll be able to get across what we want. So it's a kind of a message to say, look, we want these discussions to happen. We want to be able to debate these points properly across the Parliament, across the House and in the Labour Party. But ultimately we want to be, most of us still want to be Europeans, and we're proud of being Europeans.
So then really it is a pro-EU movement in the sense of you don't want Article 50 fundamentally to be triggered?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately we don't want Article 50 triggered, and we would want to remain within the European Union, would be our ultimate goal, and a goal supported by David Lammy and so. But it's more open the discussions, let's have some debates, and let's talk about this subject, because we didn't have the proper discussions in the party in the last referendum.
So let's talk about Jeremy Corbyn. You've said that he perhaps is he's not supporting the core socialist values in calling for a three-line whip for the Labour members to vote for Article 50. Do you feel like Corbyn's losing the base of support he had in the party with his decision on Article 50?
I mean, across the board, people have rejected the three-line whip. I mean, Corbynites, non-Corbynites. I've seen, like, in our own group, we've had many people who voted Jeremy Corbyn, who were Corbynite supporters, who voted for him, who campaigned for him during the leadership election, and they've come out and said, look, I support Jeremy Corbyn, but I cannot support him issuing the three-line whip because it is such a draconian thing for something that can have such dire consequences on
So are they becoming then sort of demoralised with Corbyn as leader in the stance he's taking? Are they feeling more distant from the leader they once supported?
I would say they're more upset with the leadership, the way they're standing. I mean, we've always been very clear to make ourselves to say we're not an anti-EU we're not an anti-Corbyn group. We are set up to be a broad church of the party. There isn't, like, a lot of the groups are alienating themselves by having a lot of Lib Dems, and a lot of Lib Dem supporters are attacking the Labour Party members, and a lot of party members are actually leaving and going to the Lib Dems and stuff like that. We want to be the voice of the Labour Party.
But do you think, has Jeremy Corbyn, or is Jeremy Corbyn at serious risk, do you think, from the mood you've been feeling in your campaign, at losing touch with his grassroots support?
Yeah, I think he is at risk of losing support from his grassroots, and it's heartbreaking to say, because we need to be election ready, not having the same debates we're having 10 years later. I mean, it's just it feels that, you know, people, even his own supporters, I mean, we've heard Clive Lewis himself says he may be prepared to vote down Article 50. It's this kind of thing that, you know, it's not universally supported.
Okay, so what if Jeremy Corbyn doesn't listen to you? What if Jeremy Corbyn hears your campaign and he doesn't change his stance, he doesn't acknowledge that there is a movement here of support for your cause? What are you going to do next?
Well, the next campaign is what we'll be doing is we'll be taking motions to CLPs up and across the country. We'll be talking in our CLPs, talking to our MPs, and opening up the debates at a local level to say, look, we don't agree with it. This is why we don't agree with it. This is why I'm European and I'm proud, and putting motions to ask our MPs to not vote on the ultimate trigger in Article 50, or if they're going to vote for it, at least start getting debates going so we can hold the government to account.
Okay, and so what advice would you give if Jeremy Corbyn was listening to this now? What would you say to him right now in this situation with regards to what's going on this week?
I would say, well, we want the whip removed. That's the first baseline, and let's get back to our socialist values. Let's get back to the values of defending those who need our voice, and those who are going to be hardest hit by Brexit are going to be the poorest and lowest in society. So we need to be that voice again. And at the moment, with Brexit the way it is, we're not going to be that. We need to hold Theresa May. We need to hold Boris Johnson. We need to hold Michael Gove. And we need to hold Nigel Farage and all those who drove around on that big red bus. We need to hold them to account. We need to say to them, look, you promised us 350 million, pay up. We need to put it to the people again. We say, look, we need a debate on the actual terms of leaving. It's great to say, you know, we're leaving, but let's put it to the people who, like, once we know what the deals are, once we know what we're actually leaving and what the consequences are, let's put that back to the people.
Okay. Jon Proctor, the chair of Labour Against Brexit movement, thank you very much for coming on the show.
No problem.
Chloe, do you think that this outpouring of protest and upset regarding Donald Trump's executive order is going to have any impact whatsoever with the way the public respond to the Brexit negotiations and Article 50, or do you think they're two completely separate issues and they're not going to have any influence on each other?
Well, they're two separate issues. I mean, supporting Donald Trump and voting to take back control of democratic process in your country are two very different things. I think people tried to lump Trump and Brexit together, but they were two very different decisions to make. I don't think that the protests will impact on Brexit at all. And the Remain protests, you know, of 8 to 10,000, they do seem very impressive, but I don't think they compare to the 17.4 million people who did vote to leave on June 23rd.
Laura, is going to have no impact in the Brexit.
I tend to agree. I think they are two separate issues, and I think that as hard as it is, we all need to sort of try and, if you care about both issues, I think you should try and focus on both issues as much as possible, because this is a very crucial time in the Brexit negotiations and Brexit debate, and I think people who care about what the deal looks like in the end should sort of try and separate the two and keep their eyes on the ultimate.
Well, there's a lot of speculation at the moment to do with the Labour Party. Obviously, the discussions are underway in the Commons at the moment to do with Article 50, and there have been rumours of Labour revolts against the three-line whip to trigger Article 50 by Jeremy Corbyn. We've had two shadow ministers already resign over this issue. How vulnerable, Laura, is Jeremy Corbyn to a Labour revolt over Article 50?
I think now that the Conservative rebels have quietened down and have been appeased by Theresa May promising a white paper on the Brexit deal, I think this vote has sort of been diffused somewhat. The importance has been lost. So I do think the argument between Corbyn and some of his more prominent members of his team is potentially quite difficult for the party, but I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the vote itself. I don't think it's going to threaten him as leader particularly. How it plays into the upcoming byelections could be interesting, both in sort of very Leave constituencies. So it's obviously part of his motivation in imposing this three-line whip is to kind of show that he has a firm position on Brexit at last. But I think and a lot of the criticism, indeed, coming from his supporters is that he needs to have a firm position on Brexit. But in many senses, the damage is already done on that front. People who want him to have a strong position because they want to frustrate Brexit, it's sort of a bit late to have that view, I think.
Chloe, do you think this is Jeremy Corbyn's on any vulnerability for mass Labour revolt against the three-line whip?
I think a lot of Labour people will be upset that Brexit is happening, but as Keir Starmer said in Parliament today, the Labour Party are a party that respect democratic decisions, and 2/3 of Labour MPs have constituencies that did vote Leave. So I believe that most of them will vote with their constituencies. Those with the Remain constituencies might feel otherwise, but it's important to remember that Parliament did vote 6-1 to put this decision to the British people. And this bill is simply giving the government permission to enter the negotiations to take us out of the EU. So I don't understand why MPs would seek to amend or delay that. There will be scrutiny later down the line, for example, with the Great Repeal Bill. But this is something that all MPs, in my opinion, should be voting in favour of.
Just to go back on a point you made, Laura, about the impact of Corbyn's position on the by-elections which are coming up. Just to explain exactly how you think, or if it could impact it at all.
Well, I'm not sure it will. I don't think it could change the results in either of the by-elections.
What are you predicting for the by-election, or what do you think might?
Well, I think the UKIP is coming out pretty strong. In one of them, and the Conservatives seem to be doing quite well in terms of the other. So it's not looking great for him. So you can understand that he would want to try and do something to kind of present himself as on board with Brexit. But I think going back to the point about the way MPs are voting, I do think it's reasonable to think that MPs who represent Remain constituencies would want to vote against triggering Article 50 on principle. I mean, most of them will know that they aren't going to win this vote, but I think even in a sense that's even more significant because they are showing their constituents that they are listening to them, even if they aren't going to win the vote. I mean, they're not going to change this situation, but I can see why they're doing it.
So both of you do accept then that the government pretty much has this in the bag in terms of triggering Article 50. There might have been a lot of noise made about the possibility of a vote over Article 50, but fundamentally the government isn't going to have, in the Commons at least, too much of an issue this week. Okay. Just give us then some thoughts and predictions of going forwards then beyond the Commons discussion and the Commons vote. What's going to be the biggest challenges for the government with regards to Article 50 in Parliament and throughout the whole process up to March? Perhaps, Claire, if we start with you.
Yes, well, I think there are some Lords that could choose to vote against or try to delay Article 50 going through. Quite a few of them have EU pensions, so they might feel inclined to put in a good word for the EU and not be seen to be in favour of leaving. It's going to be an interesting time. I have a feeling, though, that they will, as an unelected chamber, be quite cautious about trying to overturn a democratic vote of the British people. I think that would be very damaging to the reputation, and some people would lose sympathy with the fact that there is a chamber in Parliament that is entirely unelected.
Laura, is it the Lords with their EU pensions?
I'm not sure about the EU pensions issue, but I do think that I think you're right that the Lords will be reticent to try to frustrate Brexit. But I do think yes, there could be more trouble for the government in the Lords. I think that perhaps they will be seeking assurances from the government on some important issues that remain completely unanswered, such as the status of EU citizens living in the UK, the status of British citizens living in the European Union, workers' rights, all kinds of questions that the people do want reassurance on. And I do think that there's a role for the Lords, be it unelected or not, in holding the government to account ahead of Article 50 being triggered. So,
and then just finally, just on terms of how the government's being viewed by the general public, I should say. Sorry. Obviously, when Theresa May visited Donald Trump, there was a positive response to the way she handled her visit, and then of course the executive order. There was a backlash against Theresa May and the government's response to that. What do you think the result of the past week's activities? Has it really made any difference? Is Theresa May still viewed as a warm favourite amongst the electorate, or has she dented her reputation, her government's reputation, by her reactions to what's been going on, particularly in the past few days? Perhaps, Chloe, we start with you.
Okay, I think a lot of people have sympathy with the difficult situation Theresa May is under. There's obviously a lot of anger about what's happening in America, but most people recognise that you have to be diplomatic. And whilst they might not have agreed with May's handling of this particular situation, she's definitely the Prime Minister that will deliver Brexit and that will implement this result. And her approval ratings are very high. I think after this week they will still be very high, and she will have quite a far lead ahead of Jeremy Corbyn.
Laura, are you?
I think she'll recover from. She was in a position of considerable strength following her big speech on Brexit. That has been dented somewhat by the past few days, but I think that she will recover and get back on track and refocus again on trade. She was doing very well when she was channeling the Brexit debate into a discussion about trade deals, and that was partially why the US visit went so well, because they focused on trade, but it came apart when she was found wanting in other aspects. So if she can get it back onto trade discussions, she'll be all right.
Okay, and we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you very much, Laura Hood, political editor of The Conversation, and Chloe Westley of Change Britain. Sadly, that's all we got time for this week. But thanks to my guests, the chair of Labour Against Brexit, Jon Proctor, Laura Hood, political editor of The Conversation, and Chloe Westley of Change Britain. Don't forget you can find videos, comment and much more on our Facebook page and on Twitter @TipTVPolitics. Join us again next week for more of the latest news in politics. Goodbye.